Are you fed up with the palaver of trying to gather on your sewing machine, sewing to apparently parallel lines and then tugging hopefully on each thread and praying they don't break before you get the gather you want? Yeah, me too. So I tried gathering on my Overlocker. So today's 2 tips are 2 different ways of doing that. So let's go over to Overlocker Laura now and find out how I got on. So as I've just mentioned, this is the traditional way that people tend to learn to gather on the sewing machine. And yes, it's fine. And I think when you're a beginner sewist, to understand how this works in terms of being able to pull on your bobbin threads in order to gather. So if I pull the top threads out of the way, should have done them in different colours really, then you can see that you can create a gather. This is just I think it's cotton lawn. It's what I made my second peony dress in for my friend's birthday party earlier in the year. So yeah, it's possible to gather, but it's very fiddly. And you have to try to sew your lines in parallel and within the seam allowance, and it can really be quite fiddly. But let me show you this. So this was when I was practicing gathering on my Overlocker when I was making my garments. So this was an early attempt at gathering with my Overlocker. So you see that's the cuff. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 different ways today that you can gather with your Overlocker. So hopefully, she says, checking, I hope there may be some editing there because I turned the camera around by mistake, but hopefully if I can just zoom in, excuse the squeaking, I've got you on a tripod thing, so hopefully I can just zoom in a little bit on my settings there. Hopefully you can see that. So you can see my 4 dials. So I've got my lower looper, my upper looper, and my 2 needles. And I have actually threaded up my needles in different thread from my loopers, so that hopefully you can see when I sew on my fabric the difference between them. And then I've got my stitch length and my differential feed. So at the moment, I've got my machine set to the settings for a standard 4-thread overlocking stitch. So I have actually got a setting that is called gathering 4. So for gathering, when you're using all 4 of your tension dials. So if I change my program setting, it doesn't change anything, it's still manual, but it moves a dial. It shows you what the settings should be if you want to gather. So this is saying that both your left and your right needles stay at 3 on tension dial, as do your upper and lower looper. But what you do is you change your stitch length to 4, and then you change your differential feed from 1 up to between 1.5 and 2. What's the maximum? 2.25 it's saying. So let me do 1.75 and we'll see how we go. So let's have a little go on this and let's see what sort of a gathering we get with this. So I'm not trying to take off any of the seam allowance with the knife, because obviously you're going to want, if you can, because normally when you gather or you're creating stitches to ease in one piece of fabric into another one, you're going to want to sew it in at the seam allowance. So ideally your gathering stitches should be in the seam allowance. I'm going to try not to chop anything off. So let's see how I go. Okay, so editing Laura here just realised that the result of that bit was out of shot. So what you can see here is that I separated out the needle threads, which are the purple ones, from the looper threads, which are the white ones. And then what you can do is you can increase the gather like that. So you can keep pulling on the threads, or in my case I'm doing it the other way and I'm pulling on the fabric, and you can get a nice gather, but you've got both rows able to work in tandem. So yeah, so that's what I was trying to show you, but I got out of shot there. And the great thing about this, of course, is that you have got, well, two things. One is you've sewn both of your lines of stitching at the same time, and they're not likely to give way because they're secured by the chain. So you know that they're even, and it's quicker because you're using an overlocker, which is quicker than a sewing machine anyway, and B, you're only sewing down the line once, so you're not going to risk going wibbly. So there you go. And because you've still got the chain in place at the other side, you're not going to risk pulling out your overlocker stitching by yanking a bit hard on these, as you can do if you get a bit enthusiastic with the sewing machine. So that's one way that you can gather on the overlocker. But there is a second way which will make the stitches much harder to adjust, but is fine if you are reasonably relaxed about the amount of fabric that you're using. So for example, if you're creating a ruffle and you can use extra material. So what you do in this case is you crank up your tension settings on your needle. So between something like about 7 and 9. So let's try a 7. And then you crank up your, so I had that on there. If you crank up your stitch length to the maximum you can, so on here it's a 5 for me. Now what you can try and do is increase your differential feed, but you will see if I want to increase my differential feed, there's a fundamental relationship between the stitch length and the differential feed measurement. So if I want to increase that, I'm going to have to put my needles tension, I'm going to have to put my stitch length down. So at 4.5 stitch length, I can have it at 2. But if I want it at 2.5, then I am stuck with a 4 on the stitch length. So that's got it on the maximum differential feed. So, and I've increased my tension on my needles. So let me show you how that works. Ideally without overlocking my finger. Right, so you can see, hopefully, that that has created a really nice even gather, but it's much harder to move that because your needle tension is much higher. So if you want to move it around, you're better to keep your needles on the 3 length. But if you're not worried about that and you just want increased ruffles, you can use this other way of doing it. And here you can see it's really nice and even. Now, when I did my peony dress, I actually managed to work out by measuring the opening of the sleeve on the dress and then measuring the circumference of the cuff, the ratio by which I needed to reduce the cuff edge in order to put it onto the garment. But that can be quite fiddly. What I could do was I could have done a whole set of ruffles and then matched it so that it fitted in with the edge of the sleeve circumference and then just removed the excess. So I have to say that much of this information I got from the Stitch Sisters tutorial, which you can get online at thestitchsisters.co.uk, so I'll link them down below. So what I've done is I've kind of created a bit of a synopsis of the information that they give, but they also talk about the ability to get attachments for your overlocker, where you can actually sew a ruffle on one piece of fabric and attach it to another piece of fabric which remains unruffled at the same time. And that's where they talk about the problem with the ratio. But I think it's also true if you decide to do it separately. And I have thought about investing in this piece of kit, but it's quite expensive. And I think for the amount of time I sew ruffles at the moment, it's probably not worth it. Welcome back. I hope you found those couple of tips useful, and next time we'll look at doing rolled hems on the overlocker. So yes, so I haven't done a huge amount since I last put up a Vlogmas. It's only a couple of days, and as I think I mentioned to you, I wasn't feeling that great. So yesterday was spent mostly kind of sorting out doing Christmas cards and things, and managing to do the bits of Christmas shopping that we've got. We're on our own for Christmas. Most of my friends live quite a distance away, so it's mostly a case of getting things in the post. In one case, I've got a knitting friend in the United States who you'll have seen some gifts from in the past. So I basically sent something to her from within the United States because of all the hassle with tariffs and everything. So that's all now done. And the other thing I did try to do was to fix the zip on my jeans where I pulled it off in the last vlog. And part of trying to do that was to ask my husband to help me, and neither of us could get the zipper back on. So I have unpicked it. You can see, at least you could see, because I thought I'd put it out and I can't find it. Here we go, the dead zipper. So at least I've got a guide to know how much of it is going to go to the edge of the waistband. And so I need to sew in a new one. I went and got a new one yesterday. Thank goodness they had some in. So yeah, so that's the next on my sewing list to do. So yeah, other than that, I haven't really been up to very much. But let's now go and open some gifts from the lovely Tina. So today I've got gift 7 and gift 8. So here's gift 7. Here we go. So yes, this feels like a book of some sort, maybe a notebook or something. I don't know. It definitely feels like a book. Oh wow. Sewing journal and project book. That is lovely. That's lovely. Sewing project planner. So you can put all your personal details in there. I love the way it says insurance number in the front. But oh, that's great. Look. You can put in the names of your projects that you're planning and your sewing pan, and if it's a gift. And this is really useful because I tend to be really bad at doing this. So to have everything in one place, you can write all your machine settings down, look, and what needle you use, what thread you used. There's even space for a sketch. I think that's great. I think that'll be a really nice record of what you do every year. So I shall try to keep that up to date in 2026. So thank you so much, Tina. That is lovely. Really appreciate that. So that is gift 7. She says, knocking over some overlocker thread. And here is gift 8, which is a completely different shape. So here we go. More rustling. My parents used to tease me when I was a kid because they used to say, you know, I was a real scrabbler with the wrapping paper. So I miss that. Oh, lovely. So it's a sew and knit gauge. So it's one of those really handy ones where you can actually set the marker on it so that you're clear that you're being accurate. And that is great, because I have got one of these, but it's getting really bent and really old because I've had it since I started sewing, and it's always useful to have a backup one with going to socials. So that is great. So a much needed replacement. Thank you ever so much, Tina. So that is gifts 7 and 8. So 4 more to go still. It's really exciting. So I hope you are all well. I hope you are getting some time to sew, if that's how you're finding time to relax over this kind of run up to the holiday break. Do please let me know how you gather. I know some people do it with things like dental floss, sewing over dental floss with a zigzag stitch. So let me know, please, what works for you, and if there's any other tips you would like to see. So that's all for today. I'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.